You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode number 86 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. There is bourbon in my glass. It is waiting to be had, and that means, y'all, I need some company. We always start this show off with a toast, and I make no exceptions. So get yourself a glass, fill it up, raise it up, and let's say cheers. Whew, all right, I am drinking one hell of a wild kind of bourbon. Today, I am drinking Redemption High Rye Bourbon Whiskey. I picked this bourbon out specifically because I noticed they had rebranded. Originally, the Redemption bottle was long and narrow, and it had a very bold, ugly sort of label on it. I avoided it for that specific reason only. It's since been repackaged into something a little bit more traditional looking, so I figured, what the hell, I will give it a try. It is clearly young, but I like the mash bill. It's 60% corn, 36% rye, and 4% barley. Definitely has not been aged for a long time, but that's all right. Right up front, it's got kind of a spicy, woody sort of flavor. And actually, I swear to God, I'm tasting a little bit of licorice in here. And then, of course, the corn smooths it out so that you get that very mellow vanilla caramel sort of flavor. This is very easy to drink. I'm knocking mine back straight. No rocks, nothing. Because what the hell, y'all? I'm feeling a little crazy, and this bourbon is doing me good. Well, my guy and I are officially back from Aruba, and we have assimilated into reality. I'll tell you, sometimes it is hard to land in Chicago because it never ceases to underwhelm. I've said this a million times, I'm sure, but leaving Aruba is a little bit like leaving the land of Oz. You have to say farewell to all sorts of gorgeous colors and sounds, amazing food, and of course, some pretty interesting characters. My guy and I were staying at a resort that was dedicated exclusively for adults. Now, mind you, not having kids at the resort didn't exclude it from its own set of special problems. And that is how we encountered a specific kind of character that I'd like to call the pickup artist. My guy and I are fairly confident he was staying at the same resort as us, but we really only saw him at 2 points in time during the day. And I know this because my guy and I observed this guy like a couple of perverted National Geographic explorers for a good 4 days. According to our drunken records, he came out from 4:30 to 6 p.m. and from midnight to 1 a.m., which was precisely when our hotel would hold cocktail hours. Oh, these cocktail hours were amazing. Every drink on the menu was half price. They gave us free appetizers. My guy and I took advantage of every single cocktail hour twice a day for 11 days. And like I said, that's where we found the pickup artist. I'm going to guess he was somewhere between 50 and 60 years old. Not necessarily unattractive, just somewhat questionable. Kind of like a used car salesman. He was the kind of guy who, when he wasn't wearing his sunglasses, would perch them on the back of his head as if he was concealing an extra set of eyes. And every happy hour, he would come out and he would proceed to systematically work through every single woman in the bar. At one point in time, he may have actually had game. But over the years, it had kind of devolved into a tragic sort of vaudeville routine. It went from being mildly amusing on the first day to being absolutely insulting by the fourth day. Now, mind you, I would never deny anybody the opportunity to attempt to pick up someone at a bar or to strike up conversation with somebody because bars are designed specifically to be social. This guy was not there in that spirit. He was treating every single happy hour like his own personal dating Hunger Games. We attempted to strike up conversation with a pickup artist one night, more out of curiosity than a genuine attempt to be friendly, and he struck us down immediately, as if being seen with a married couple would be the biggest cock block in the bar. And he had a whole system. He would start at the far end of the bar, chat up the first reasonably looking single woman, and then proceed to work through every single woman in a straight line until he hit the end of the bar. And if he hadn't found anyone, which of course he never did, he'd just go on back in the other direction. And I'll tell you, by day 4, I was kind of disgusted with him. And I decided this guy needed to be taught a lesson. I wasn't exactly sure how or where or what even that lesson would be, but I knew he had to be put in his place. And y'all, did he ever give me the perfect opportunity. It was on the long end of the midnight happy hour on the 4th day, and the pickup artist was getting just a little bit desperate. My guy and I watched him work over a British flight attendant hardcore. First, he attempted to light her cigarette and failed miserably by burning his fingers. Then he started sliding his bar stool closer to hers, and the more he inched closer to her, the more she inched farther away from him. Now, I'm confident this woman was more than capable of fully dismissing this guy when she was ready to. I just decided to give her an opening. I tell my guy my plan, and we call over our favorite cocktail server. He and I have been going to this resort for the past 3 years, so we've gotten to know the staff very well. We've made some great friends, and we have almost family-like friendships with these people, so when I told the server about my playful little plan, she was more than happy to accommodate. She disappears behind the bar for a few minutes and returns to the British flight attendant with a glass of champagne on a tray. The flight attendant looks absolutely delighted, and she takes the glass and she asks the pickup artist, "Is this from you?" Now you can see the beads of sweat forming on this guy's forehead. He knows damn well he did not send her that glass of champagne, but he also knows how much he wants to take her back to his room. So what does he do? He claims that glass of champagne as if it was the most genius idea he had ever come up with. He looks her right in the eyes and says, "Oh yes, a woman as lovely as you deserves to end her night with champagne." And right on cue, that's when our server cut him off. She said, "Oh no, sir, you're mistaken. That champagne is from the couple sitting over there." She gestures towards us and she says, "They send it to the lady with their compliments and invite her to join them if she's so inclined." I have never seen anything quite like what happened next. The flight attendant takes the glass of champagne and raises it up to us in a toast of sorts. And then with her other hand, she takes her handbag and whacks the pickup artist upside the head with it. It was a resounding thump that silenced the bar. It did the job spectacularly, better than I could have ever done, and I have to admit, I felt a little envious. I've never had the opportunity to thump somebody with my handbag, and it looked positively delightful. Of course, the reality is I lack any sort of grace to be able to do that properly. Were I to attempt to whack somebody with purse, I'd wind up missing and gouging some poor fool's eyes out. Meanwhile, I would turn all of the contents into my purse into projectile missiles, and I would splatter the entire bar with a hailstorm of loose pens and change, lip gloss, and a couple of errant Rolaids from the bottom of my purse. So although purse thumping is something that I will never be able to do, it did not stop me from expressing my absolute admiration when the flight attendant came over to us to thank us for her drink. "That was amazing," I told her. "How in the world did you ever get so good at hitting someone with your handbag?" She just looked at me and laughed and took a sip of her champagne. And then she gave me perhaps the best bit of wisdom I have ever gotten in a bar. She said, with her lovely British accent, "My dear, it's all in the wrist." And to that, I am raising up my glass and I am saying cheers to all of the talented purse thumpers of the world. Oh, bourbon. Now that story was a very good example of how you can make friends while traveling. What I'd like to do now is demonstrate how to do the exact opposite of that. Because me being me, I am far better at losing friends and alienating people than I am at anything else. As I mentioned, we were staying at an adult-only resort. Now, they had a sister resort that was right across the street, and that was open to families. And these two properties shared their own private island about 10 or 15 minutes right off the coast of Aruba. And that island shared the same principle. Half of it was for adults, the other half was for families. Every morning, my guy and I would pack ourselves up and get on that shuttle boat, and I don't think I have to tell you what half of the island we spent all of our time on. Every day that we were on the beach, I would notice that there'd be one or two girls who would be topless sunbathing. It being private, that sort of thing was more than allowed. And oh, how I envied them. It looked so wonderful. And I made myself a promise on our very first day that before we left, I was going to sunbathe topless too. Every day, we would get out on the beach and I'd be all jazzed about taking my top off, but I would come up with countless different reasons about why I shouldn't do it. I'd think that maybe I would get sunburned, or maybe that I didn't want to deal with any of the attention that I might get. But the truth of the matter was, and I'll be completely honest with y'all, I was a little scared. Mind you, I am an absolute free spirit and I have no problems with nudity whatsoever. But somehow in my 40-odd years of life, it's become ingrained in my brain that baring my tits in public is something that you're just not supposed to do. It was a little disheartening, and I started to beat myself up over it a little bit. I'd look at those girls out there on the beach and I'd feel jealous and excited and wish that I had the guts to do it too. And finally, on our last day at the beach, something just hit me. Maybe it was the perfect combination of alcohol, but I dropped my reserve, grew a pair, and took my top off. It was as amazing as I had hoped it would be. Of course, it took a little bit of getting used to be topless in broad daylight on a beach where anybody could happen to see me. And then, of course, every so often we would have beach attendants coming up to us asking if they can collect our empty glasses, and I would have to hand over 6 or 7 empty Mai Tai glasses with my tits out. Still, it was amazing just to be stretched out on my deck chair, letting all that wonderful sun hit me, and just feeling really, really free and really proud of myself. But then, of course, my bliss is interrupted. And the cause of that interruption was a child. Why is it, y'all, that even when you do not have kids, they somehow find a way to interrupt the best moments of your life? As I was laying there all happy and pleased and feeling very contented with myself, out of nowhere comes a screaming 7-year-old right out onto my adult-only beach. He was after the flamingos, you see. The adult-only beach, being something of a more quiet and reserved area, was home to 7 or 8 flamingos that would just wander along the shore and hang out with all of the people. They were so chill that they would quite literally eat food out of your hands. And when the sun would get too hot, they would curl up like little pink footballs under your deck chairs. In fact, they were so domesticated and so rampant that my guy and I started referring to them as beach chickens. And this kid wanted one. He is doing everything in his power to catch one of those damn pink birds. He's splashing in the water, he's trying to grab them. It is horrifying and noisy and really obnoxious. Fortunately, the island staff was on the ball and they managed to corral the kid and drag him back off to his other half of the island. Unfortunately, that didn't last because the kid came running on back about 15 minutes later. And this whole song and dance is repeated a good 2 or 3 times before finally, the kid comes running back out onto the adult half, and he's followed by his parents, who have clearly decided that it's far too difficult to keep the kid contained on the family half, and have decided to set up camp on the adult half. So the kid is leading this obnoxious parade, screaming and chasing after flamingos, and he is followed by his mother. She's the kind of woman who looks as though every single step she takes is an absolute annoyance. And the expression on her face says that despite the fact that she's quite literally in paradise, she'd rather be anywhere else. She's followed by her husband, who looks as though he'd prefer if his next step was right off of a chair and into a noose. He's carrying her purse, her beach bag, the kid's backpack, a large floaty, and a cooler. They survey the half of the beach that they are on, looking for a place to set up camp. Now, the adult half is far smaller than the family half, and this being about 12:30 in the afternoon or so, space is limited. So she starts barking out orders to the guy who's doing his best to accommodate her wishes. Because she doesn't want to sit too close to the ocean, she doesn't want to sit under a tree, but she also has to be in the shade. Well, finally, she locates a spot that seems to match her impossible requests and starts leading her little processional over to it. Now, to get there, she has to walk in front of my deck chair, where, if you will recall, I am laying out topless. She clearly sees me and stops in front of my deck chair. She shakes her head a couple of times and says, "Ugh, some people." Now, this isn't something that she muttered to herself. This wasn't something that she concealed in a whisper to her husband. No. This was a very deliberate comment, said loud enough so that I could hear it and that all of the people around me could hear it, because her goal was to tit-shame me. I've never been tit-shamed before, so I wasn't entirely sure what the appropriate response should be. Initially, I was embarrassed. It's hard not to be when you are laying out there with yourself exposed to the world and a very nasty lady staring down at you and shaking her head and wagging her finger. But then I realized it's not like I was prancing around like Lady Godiva in front of more than just a couple of consenting adults and a bunch of flamingos. So that realization turned my embarrassment into blind, seething rage. I wanted to run up to that tit-shamer like some sort of naked, savage animal and tell her exactly where she could stuff her attitude. I'd worked hard to get to the point where I felt comfortable enough to lay out with my top off, and nobody was going to take that away from me. And I was a heartbeat away from doing that. But two things stopped me. One, my guy and I had already had something of an altercation earlier in our trip. And of course, it involved a child. He and I were at a hotel casino and actually just getting ready to leave. There was another errant child running rampant, banging on machines and trying to jam his hand up one of the cigarette machines. And my guy decided just to have a little bit of a chat with him. So he walks up to the boy and he says, "Hey kid, they're hiding your brother." Now, I couldn't tell you what exactly transpired after that, because my guy and I beat it the hell out of there, got into a cab, and rode back down the island where we belonged. Now, sitting topless on this private island, we didn't exactly have such a quick, easy, or convenient escape path. So a confrontation kind of seemed like a bad idea. And two, I was topless. I really didn't feel like putting my top back on. The sun felt good, I had a cocktail in my hand. I gotta say, those things kind of mellowed me out a little bit, and I decided to leave her comeuppance to the fates. And y'all, karma kicked in. A little while later, my guy returned from the bar with more cocktails for us and let me know that the tit-shamer was there talking to anybody who would listen about how appalling it was that someone was topless on this beach. Meanwhile, of course, her child is hurling balls of wet sand at flamingos. But no, really, let's focus on the topless sunbather. I'm sure her intention was to rally enough people around her that I would be embarrassed enough to put my top back on. What she hadn't counted on was that she was surrounded by mature adults, most of whom were European, and had far better things to concern themselves with than a couple of naked tits. In fact, once they learned that there were some naked tits on the beach, it seemed like a perfectly fine idea to follow suit. Because y'all, that's the thing about topless sunbathing. All it takes is one brave person to be the first to do it. Another 20 minutes later, there are more naked tits sprouting up on that beach than there are dandelions in a prairie. My guy and I counted a good 13 naked tits out there. 15 if you count mine. It was a fabulous sight. Of course, to us, not to the tit-shamer, who was so disgusted by what she saw that she made her husband pack up all their gear. She clamped her hands over her son's eyes and dragged them both back off to the family side of the island where they should have stayed in the first place. My guy and I clink glasses over the whole experience, and he looks at me and he says, "You know, you kind of caused a revolution there." I'll tell you, that made me feel pretty damn good. I just wished I hadn't waited so damn long to take my top off in the first place. So with that, I am raising up my glass, and I am drinking to all of the lovely tits I saw on that beach. Cheers, ladies. Oh, bourbon. You know, it's a little odd to be drinking bourbon after ingesting so much rum out there in Aruba. Don't worry, though. I'm handling it just fine. Before I let y'all go, I just wanted to remind you that the comic book I'm in is coming out at the end of the month. It's called Kindred Homecomings, and I play the part of Sheriff Melinda Clare. The story is kind of a retelling or re-envisioning of the 80s horror movie The Kindred. It also features actress Jamie Bernadette, and it is tremendously cool. You can pre-order a copy of the comic book right now. Just go to snugcomics.com or hit me up on Twitter. I'll be happy to send you the link. Now I'm going to go drink some more of my bourbon and maybe take my top off, or not. Either way, y'all, I hope you have a great week. I will be back to chat with you again next Sunday. Cheers.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.